Hello everyone, this is Smriti Sethi and today I'll be discussing on the topic bioremediation. The contents are as follows. Introduction. We'll talk about what is bioremediation, how does bioremediation works. There are different types of bioremediation and the advantages and the disadvantages of bioremediation. Introduction. Now, bioremediation is a process which involves degrading, removing, changing, immobilizing, or detoxifying various chemicals and physical pollutants from the environment through the activity of bacteria, fungi, algae, and plants. Now, bioremediation, it is a branch of biotechnology which employs the use of living organisms, or we can say microorganisms like bacteria, fungi, microbes, in order to remove the contaminants, pollutants, and the toxins from the soil, water, and many other environments. Now, bioremediation is also used to clean certain groundwater or environmental problems. For example, oil spill. The microorganisms may be indigenous to a contaminated area, or they may be isolated from elsewhere and brought to the contaminated site. The process of bioremediation can be monitored indirectly by measuring the oxidation reduction potential or the redox in soil and groundwater together with the help of pH, temperature, oxygen content, electron acceptor, electron donor concentrations, and the concentration of the breakdown product, which is carbon dioxide. Now, how does this process of bioremediation works? Now, bioremediation is a process, as we know, that it relies upon the stimulating the growth of certain microbes that utilize the contaminants like oil, solvents, pesticides for the sources of food and energy. Now, these microbes will convert the contaminants into small amount of water and also into carbon dioxide, which is a harmless gas. Now, bioremediation, it requires certain combination of temperature, nutrients, and food. If these will be unavailable or absent, it may lead to prolonged cleanup of the contaminants. Now, there are certain conditions that are unfavorable for bioremediation, and that may be improved by adding amendments to the environment. Now, those amendments are molasses, vegetable oil, or simple air. The work of these amendments are to optimize the conditions for the microbes to flourish, and they'll help in accelerating the completion of the bioremediation process. This image shows the circle of bioremediation, that how the process of bioremediation occurs. Now, there are different types of bioremediations. First is in situ and second is ex situ. In situ, it involves the treatment of the contaminated material at the site of action. So the treatment will occur at the site itself. This in situ bioremediation involves certain processes which involves bioventing, biosparging and bioaugmentation. Now what is bioventing? Bioventing means that the supply of air and the nutrients through wells to contaminated soil, and this is done to stimulate the growth of the indigenous bacteria. Now it is used for simple hydrocarbons and can be used where the contamination is deep under the surface. The second process is biosparging. It involves the injection of air under pressure below the water table so that the groundwater oxygen concentrations can be increased, and this will enhance the rate of biological degradation of the contaminants naturally that are occurring bacteria. The third process is bioaugmentation. Now the microorganisms are imported to a contaminated area so that the degradation process can be enhanced. The second type of bioremediation is ex situ bioremediation. Now this type involves the removal of the contaminated material to be treated elsewhere and not at the site of action. Now this process of this type of bioremediation, it involves certain processes that are biopiles, land farming, bioreactors, composting. Now talking about land farming, the contaminated soil is excavated and it is spread over a prepared bed and periodically tilled until pollutants are degraded. Now the goal of doing land farming is to stimulate the biodegradative microorganisms and also to facilitate their aerobic degradation of contaminants. The second is biopiles. It is a hybrid of land farming and composting. Essentially, the engineered cells, these are constructed as aerated composted piles, and these are used for the treatment of surface contamination with the help of petroleum hydrocarbons. The third process is a bioreactors. Now this process involves the processing of contaminated solid materials like soil, sediment, sludge or the water through an engineered containment system. The last process involved in ex situ type of bioremediation is composting. Now composting, it is the nature's process of recycling the decomposed organic material into a rich soil, and that is known as the compost. Now, there is a difference between a phytoremediation and a bioremediation. Now, bioremediation, it makes use of either naturally occurring or deliberately introduced microorganisms so that they can consume and break down the environmental pollutants so that the polluted site can be cleaned. Now, for phytoremediation, it is a process of decontaminating soil or the water, and it makes use of plants and trees in order to absorb or to break down the pollutants. The second point for bioremediation is this method of it involves removing contaminants from the ecosystem. But phytoremediation, it is a type of bioremediation. The third point for bioremediation is it mainly uses microbes. But the process of phytoremediation, it depends upon the plants. Bioremediation process can either be an in situ type or an ex situ type. But phytoremediation is mainly an in situ type process. Bioremediation, it is more ecological friendly, and phytoremediation is cost friendly. Then comes mycoremediation. Now mycoremediation, it is the bioremediation technique which makes use of fungi so that toxic compounds can be removed. This process of mycoremediation can be carried out in the presence of both filamentous fungi, which is molds, and macrofungi, that are mushrooms. Both these classes possesses the enzymes that are helpful for the degradation of large variety of pollutants. This is the picture that depicts the process of mycoremediation. There are certain advantages of using bioremediation. Now, it is a natural process and it minimizes the damage to the ecosystem. Bioremediation often takes place underground, where the microbes or the amendments, they can be pumped in order to clean up the contaminants into the groundwater or into the soil. This process, it doesn't disrupt the communities as much as the other methodologies do while cleaning up the environment. This process is much cheaper than most cleanup methods because the requirement of the labor is very minimal or substantial equipments are not required. There are certain disadvantages also of using bioremediation as a process to clean the environment or to break down the toxic pollutants. First disadvantage is it is limited to those compounds that are biodegradable, but not all compounds that are susceptible to rapid and complete degradation. This process of bioremediation takes longer than other treatment options, such as excavation and removal of soil or incineration. Now, there is no accepted definition of clean, or evaluating the performances of bioremediation is very difficult. And there are no acceptable endpoints for the treatments of bioremediation. Thank you. These are certain references.